And we're live. Do you like horror movies? You have to fill the 2 minutes before we actually start. You a horror movie guy?
Not really, no.
Mm,
No. I think you are, right?
I am. CJ is. I saw an interesting one the other night, but if you're not a horror movie guy, it's really not going to matter to you. You a movie guy?
So. I'm
Yeah.
not like a movie buff, but I mean, yeah, I like it as much as the next guy.
Hmm. Kind of sad what's happened to theaters in general. Like, there feels like they're going to die. Like, it sort of seems like they will be around for one reason or another, but overall, like the experience of going to the movies seems like it's probably on death's door.
I'm just old enough to remember when like going to the movies was like the thing to do. You
Yes.
know, when I was in like sixth, seventh grade, it was like, the big Friday night thing was like go to the movies with your friends
Yes.
and like the ice cream place afterwards. Like that was like
Yeah.
the thing to do.
What now? There was actually. It's funny that Granite Run Mall, where I used to hang out back in the day, there was a Friendlies right next to the movie theater. So it was movie theater, and then just fucking irritate the shit out of the people who worked at the Friendlies as a like 15 year old, like, with barely any money and no reason to be there. So
Yep. Yep. That's classic. Yeah.
yeah, sad times. Sad times. I love movie theaters. Well, I love
What
going to
what
the
is
movies.
what is the thing to do nowadays for kids? Like,
Stare at your
I don't
phone.
I guess so, yeah. Go to
Yeah.
someone's house and play Fortnite.
Yeah, but do they even go to each other's houses? Like,
I think so. I have
really?
two nephews who are in high school, and they hang out with like their neighbors a lot. So they
Hmm.
go over to their neighbor's house and like play video games and stuff.
That seems fine. I mean, I was playing video games when I was that age too. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's not like going to the mall was some sort of like super meaningful experience that oh no, that they can't get, I guess. So,
Yeah,
um,
it's funny to like romanticize what we did, but like we did get in a lot of like not so ideal situations,
yes.
like when you're just like 14, 15 looking for trouble, like you're gonna find it.
Yeah, the phony phone calls don't really exist anymore. That was like 2 years of my teenage life is just fucking with people on the phone. You can't do that
Oh yeah.
anymore. Yeah. All
Dude,
right.
when soundboards came out, me and my friends,
Oh, I'm sure.
like
Yeah.
the prank calls, it was just
Oh, yes.
nonstop.
I got into real trouble with that. So, all right.
Really?
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. I'll tell that on a different pod, different day, but got into real trouble. The rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast is presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. Sign up for DraftKings Sportsbook by using promo code RTRS. And brought to you by LL Pavorsky Jewelers, where rights to Ricky Sanchez listeners go and get engaged. Briggs Auction, the official auction of the Ricky. BriggsAuction.com and Kinetic Skateboarding. Get 9.1% off your first order with promo code Dave Silver. On the show today, the BBall Paul era is over as the Sixers cut him to make room to sign Caleb Martin. We will talk about that. Also go a little deeper into what we expect from Paul George, Andre Drummond, Eric Gordon, Kelly Oubre, and Tyrese Maxey this year. I guess the who's left on the market thing doesn't really matter because we just spent all our money. And Yossi Gozlan joins us for salary cap for dummies. So there's been a lot of conversation about the second apron and the first apron and what makes it difficult. To be honest with you, I only know drips and drabs of the entire thing. I feel like a lot of listeners are the same way. So Yossi is really good at that. So we're going to bring him on, ask about like what first apron means for a team, what second apron means for a team, and how the Sixers can proceed moving forward because they don't really have any cap space left. And if we get to it, we probably won't. The white party happened again, but we might have to wait for Mike to be back before we play that video and that sort of thing. Speaking of Mike, Mike is not here. He is a bachelor party, so I replaced him with another Mike, and that is Mike O'Connor, and MOC sits in for Mike. Different Mike. Okay, I mentioned Kinetic Skateboarding. I actually just saw a great tweet from Kinetic about these new. Now, I can't wear them because they're definitely women's sweatshorts, but they're the new Kinetic women's sweatshorts in maroon and powder blue. And then I went onto the site and saw this new Kinetic women's cropped sweatshirt. I definitely can't wear a cropped sweatshirt either. But that said, it's not just for the fellas. Kinetic Skateboarding. No. For the ladies too. And as I've mentioned before, even though you can get sneakers there that you're not going to find anywhere else, like New Balance that you won't find anywhere else, Nikes that you won't find anywhere else, Converse and Vans, all that kind of stuff. The Kinetic branded gear is my favorite shit that they have. So whether it's a hoodie or a t-shirt or shorts, or, you know, we did hoodies before. I actually have a vest too. Go to kineticskateboarding.com. Use code DaveSilver for 9.1% off your first order. Without any further ado, Amos and the chef.
We were right, y'all. We were right. Even when it went wrong, we were right. We was right, y'all. We were right. So say the name. Say the name. We were right, y'all. We were right. Even when it went wrong, we were right. We were right, y'all. We were right. So say the name. Say the name. Say the name.
Welcome to the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast. I'm Spike Eskin, along with a mic to replace the other mic, but it's probably the best mic we could get to replace the other mic. That is one Mike O'Connor. Thanks for filling in, buddy.
Thanks for having me, man. Good to be here.
So it just broke about 10 minutes ago. The BBall Paul era is over and the Caleb Martin era has begun. I haven't seen numbers on the Caleb Martin signing, though my guess is it would probably take a large portion of whatever cap space they had left, which was about $9 million. But I'm sure we'll find that out as it goes on. They have to cut BBall Paul to do it. I think before we talk about Caleb Martin, we have to talk about BBall Paul and the BBall Paul era. One of... I don't know. I think you were a Paul guy. You're always a B-ball guy, right? Yep. Yeah. So I think in the 11 years we've been doing this podcast, and it is 11 years this week, he is one of the 3 or 4 most Ricky Sixers that we've ever had, in that he was weird. We advocated for him. He actually played. He was actually good when they played him. After not playing him for a while, it seemed like a real victory for us. Hence, Doc Rivers and it was a victory over Doc Rivers. And he had found he really discovered his role. And truthfully, it seemed like the worst thing that happened for him was, oddly enough, was losing James Harden and Doc Rivers, in that everything got more complicated and he just did not seem to either figure out or fit in a system in which he's not just setting screens and running to the rim and rebounding as tough as he could. So I still think he has potential. Still think he could be a real good player, and I loved having him here, and kind of a bummer that we lose him, but I get it. Where are you in the B-ball era?
I mean, it's sad to see him go, homegrown guy that we all have grown to love, but man, he really was worse this year. And it wasn't just his role was a little different. His rebounding numbers went down. It felt like there were just more brain farts all over the place. He was not good in the Knicks series. So you just kind of can't justify paying that guy $8 million a year, especially when you can sign Caleb Martin for probably that amount. It's tough to lose him, man, and I wish him the best. Also, we're talking it's definitely over. I wouldn't rule out him being back on a minimum. I don't think that would be crazy. But
especially if the market is not there for him elsewhere. There's just not a lot of cap space, by the way, at this point, and who's going to spend $8 or $10 million, even $5 or $6 million on Paul Reed at this point. It only takes one, but a lot less likely this summer than it was last summer.
I agree with that. But, as far as just Paul, the guy, like you said, one of the best Ricky guys we've had. He really embraced us. He embraced the weird part of the Sixers fan base, and that's awesome. He's such a memeable guy, the out the mud stuff and possibly selling hoodies on the bench. He's just a fun guy to have around. I'm gonna miss him if he's gone.
Yeah, I mean, selling hoodies via DM, literally himself, was completely amazing. We'll have to at some point share. Maybe we got to have like a BBall Paul episode. I would actually, assuming he leaves, I would like to get him on one more time. But the number of hilarious DMs that people shared with us as they were trying to buy hoodies, you know, one guy sent me one where somebody obviously stole BBall's phone and DM something completely inappropriate back. And then the next message was Paul apologizing for what had just happened. I don't know. It was great. And I will. And obviously he, you know, was on, from a Ricky standpoint, him tweeting once that he would be excited to be on our podcast at some point after he had already been on our podcast was truly amazing. And I do think he was a really good sport about all this stuff. We had him at the live show and we couldn't decide. So we played this thing at the live show of him setting screens, calling for the ball and not getting the ball, with CJ put "With Arms Wide Open," the Creed song, underneath it. And we played it for him. And that could go either way, right? You know, that not everybody's going to think it was funny, but he thought it was funny. And I appreciate him for that. So I will miss Paul Reed quite a bit. And he did get worse this year. And I don't know why it is. I do think there is something to the talk about him being more than he was and him trying to be more than he was and sort of lose what he was good at, and having that super specific role. I actually don't know how good he is at the other things. Like, I don't know. I can't figure out how good a shooter he is. And his weird like handles or whatever, like when he would sort of like do BBall Paul time, it was obvious there were skills in there, but I couldn't figure out which of those skills would actually be valuable to an NBA team, like who was trying to win, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it seemed like he got caught in the trap of like trying to expand his game too much. And he was even talking about like, I'm going to have a 40-inch vertical and shoot 40% from three next year. It's like, dude, you don't have to do that. Like, you just need to do the stuff that you're already good at. And I don't know. He kind of got caught in that trap of like trying to become this, like, not a star player, but a guy who can like create for himself and whatnot. And it's like, that's never going to be you.
Yeah.
Never going to be.
And it specifically wasn't really, it'll never be, not quite good, better at it than most people would think, but not quite good enough at it to actually want anyone to do it. The Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. It is crazy to look. So I'm looking at futures right now, and they haven't changed over the last week or so, but it is crazy. I'm looking at the DraftKings Sportsbook app now to see that the Celtics as the favorite to win the title, no surprise next year, plus 295. The number 2 favorite to win the title next year per DraftKings is the Sixers, which is just this. Look, I'm not saying they have the second best chance to win the title. I would put the Nuggets ahead of them. I would put the Thunder ahead of them for sure. I'd probably put the Mavericks ahead of them if I were to just bet. But to think that after everything that we've been through and the chance that Daryl took this offseason, the Sixers would be second in championship odds. So they are plus 800. The Thunder are plus 850. The Nuggets are also plus 850. And then to win the East, Celtics are plus 150. Sixers are plus 400. Knicks are plus 450. And the Bucks are plus 600. And it is interesting how everybody is sort of simultaneously all out on the Bucks at the same time. Seems like it happened all at once. If you want to get started on DraftKings Sportsbook, it's easy. Download the app. Use code RTRS. If you're new, and if you're a new user, if you're new to this, you bet $5 and you get $150 in bonus bets instantly. The app is very easy to use, so easy that I can use it while we're doing the podcast and while I'm talking and get to whatever I want to get to. I wonder if there are awards. Embiid is plus 600 to win the MVP. Jokic plus 350, Doncic plus 370. I think they finally give it to Doncic next year. They've been wanting to give it to him forever, so I think it's finally next year. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code RTRS. That is RTRS. New customers get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. Crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Got to be 21. See show notes for details. All right, Caleb Martin, 6'5"-ish, I think. Strong defender. This is just from like watching him. Strong defender, seems like a good enough shooter. Like somebody that you're confident in, that he's around the perimeter, he's going to shoot it. Decent enough ball handler. Just feels like a good rotation wing sort of player that we never ever have. It was one of the glories of having DeAnthony Melton, even though he was a guard. It just seemed like a player the Sixers never get, is like this player that can sort of do everything, can't get played off the floor during the playoffs, can fit with every lineup. Maybe I'm glorifying him, but Caleb Martin seems like a really good signing to me.
I'm with you, man. I really like it. The other thing that you didn't mention is kind of an asshole, which I think they need. You know, like their three best players are pretty nice guys, and they're going to need some Oubres and some Caleb Martins and maybe a Marcus Morris or two. So yeah, I really like it, and like proven playoff guy. You know, I don't know if he ends up starting. I still think that the best version of this team is with an actual power forward in between Paul George and Embiid. But that 5-man lineup of Maxey, Oubre, Martin, George, Embiid could be really, really good. And he's just a guy that is tough and proven and doesn't take anything off the table. And I really like it, man. He's awesome.
Yeah, it's funny, like the Heat and the Spurs seem to get players that that like seem to work really, really well where they're there, and then potentially nervous him playing elsewhere. But Caleb Martin, I'm not. He's not like a seems like the Spurs end up with guards that might not work elsewhere, like the Patty Mills. I always wanted Patty Mills, but I was also skeptical that Patty Mills was ever going to be good if he wasn't a Spur. And I get that feeling with Heat players sometimes, but Martin, I don't know how this one misses. The only thing that it might miss on is every player who we desire from other teams, when you have to watch him for 82 games and you start to see all of whatever warts he has. I'd certainly like to find out from a Heat person what they don't like about Caleb Martin. Is there any sort of, not red flags, but yellow flags that you would put up about him as a negative for the Sixers?
Not a great passer. Not as good of a three-point shooter as you think he is. I think he's like 35% for his career. I mean, he's not like, I don't feel great about him being a fifth starter. But the thing I keep going back to is like, even if turns out to be the worst possible outcome, you just trade him. Like that is the most likely trade target on the roster right now is his salary. Just because of, the restrictions around trading everyone else and the amount of money he makes and the amount of money that other role players around the league make. Worst case scenario is they package him with a first rounder for somebody who's just a much better version of him.
Yeah, and they're not going to have a ton of tradable contracts, by the way. Like this will be, they've had this issue before, going into trade deadlines and not able to have guys making the right amount of money. I think that the two players that you look at who are making the right amount of money on the Sixers right now from a trade perspective are two players that feels like, at least at this point, they need. Now, to your point, if they're trading them for a better version of whoever they are, that's cool, but it's Oubre and it's Caleb Martin, who you actually can't even imagine the Sixers rotation without. So that part is tough, but those two guys add up to 16 million, and then 17 million, and then you throw in a couple of minimums, and all of a sudden, and then we'll find out from Yossi later what they can do with that KJ Martin contract, assuming they sign him to a balloon deal. Then all of a sudden you can get in that $25-30 million range of real difference making type players. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Were you going to say something?
I was going to ask you if you think that Morey has it in his mind to get a fourth star or a borderline fourth star. Yeah. Because it's not like inconceivable cap-wise.
Right. And that's actually something that we will talk to Yossi about is like, and I said this last pod with Mike, and I said it on the air, I do feel like Morey's got something up his sleeve about some point. And I don't think that he will be content to just say, all right, we got our 3 stars and I'll just put role players around them and I'll just let this roll. And I think if given the opportunity, he would add a high level player to this team, which is when you think about, I think the Knicks and the Celtics are so interesting the way people think about them, because people think about, it's like, oh, they have all these great role players. Well, the role players on the Celtics, if we consider them as Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, and Derek White, are all making north of $30 million a year. And 2 of them have made all-star games, and 1 of them's made all defense. And then you look at the Knicks. Okay, Mikal Bridges is making $30 million, and they just traded 5 firsts for him, and whatever extension he gets is going to be a max extension. OG Anunoby's making $41 million a year, and even Josh Hart's making $20 million a year. So, like, it's just weird. Like, these high-level role players make a lot more money than you think. So whether it's a player that we consider a role player but is making that sort of number, or a star-ish player, I do, of like the Drew Holiday level sort of player, I do think that Daryl would do that and would risk depth for a player like that. Like, I think he would do the 2 of those guys and 2 picks, the Caleb Martin and Kelly Oubre, for a difference maker. Are you feeling that same thing?
I agree. I think he would totally do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the guy that, like, the archetype of a guy that would be perfect is like a Drew Holiday.
Yep.
Like that would just be the perfect 4th guy.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't think the Celtics will trade him, but that type of player, I think, is someone that Daryl would be on the lookout for.
Yeah, I don't think they would trade him, but, they're going to, the cap thing after this year is very difficult for them, and they're going to have to figure something out, because they can't pay, once you get to the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum extensions, like, you have 2 guys making $55 million a year, and like it just becomes very difficult for them to maneuver with all those guys. And that leaves, so just thinking about starting lineup before we get to Yossi, and then we'll talk about the Paul George stuff after. They do not have a prototypic point guard, and like sort of a big guard point guy that, and again, that's the Drew Holiday position that you put next to Maxey, and they do not have a power forward. I think it's more likely they sign Marcus Morris to a minimum, and he ends up starting at power forward, than they start the guys that you were talking about. And I don't think they're going to start Paul George at the 4, but that would just be my guess, that they're more likely to start Oubre and bring Caleb Martin off the bench and sign a real 4 than start the 4 that we were just talking about.
Yeah, Marcus Morris or Dario or someone like that, and trade for someone, an actual power forward during the season. I mean, I think if you just look at the way that Embiid has talked, and look at the way that Paul George has talked about the guys they want next to them, and both
Batum's,
of them,
Rocco's, yada, yada, yada. Yeah,
they clearly want someone in between them. Paul George does not want to play the 4, and Embiid tends to like having an actual, like, big, or at least not a true wing next to him. So I think it's very likely that they sign someone like that and they end up starting.
Yeah, and for the other thing is, because people were asking why Marcus Morris, and I kind of like Marcus Morris anyway, but we're sort of at the point in the NBA where the max number of quote unquote non-shooters you can have on the floor at any time is 1, and you're even stretching it with 1. And in my head, Oubre is like on the edge of non-shooter. He's not, he will shoot it, but he's also not good. He's not a good spot up 3-point shooter. He's fine, but that's why when I'm thinking about a power forward, it's more likely to me, or I would rather have shooting than some sort of, I would love to have rebounding and shooting or whatever. But if you're asking me what is more likely to have an offense that can survive defenses like Boston and New York, you have to have a guy that shoots there, especially if Oubre starting, is my opinion on that one.
What you're getting at is probably my biggest concern with the roster, and I feel I'm really positive on where they're at, but there's just a nagging part of me that keeps wondering, like, can Kelly Oubre start on a championship team?
Yep.
Is he really better off as a 6th man? And, like, can he close lineups and be in, like, the highest level of playoff basketball? I'm not totally sure, but I'm a little less worried about the shooting thing than you are. It's kind of more about decision making and defensive awareness and stuff like that. But yeah, I do kind of have a little bit of worry about him.
Yeah, I agree. And the decision making, they don't have, I mean, losing Batum out of that starting lineup from a passing standpoint and connectivity standpoint is enormous, which is, by the way, like, I'm not saying they're going to go get Lonzo Ball, but also I don't think it would be crazy for Daryl to take some weird shot on somebody who could be a player to fill that role. The Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast is brought to you by LL Pavorsky Jewelers, where Rights to Ricky Sanchez listeners go and get engaged. Now, Mike is on a bachelor party. I hope that guy went to LL. Over 400 Rights to Ricky Sanchez listeners have gone to LL Pavorsky Jewelers for their engagement rings. Really, just a fucking stunning number. Now, LL is on vacation right now. He needs a couple of weeks. He's celebrating wedding anniversary and birthday with his wife. So they're on a cruise in the Mediterranean. They need a couple of weeks because he's so committed the other time. So he will be back July 15th if you want to make an appointment. He makes appointments with every person who buys an engagement ring so he can give you one-on-one service and not feel pressure to finish up with you because he wants to get to somebody else. He wants everyone to feel special. That's what LL is. Our very first sponsor, love him to death. LL Pavorsky Jewelers is at 707 Walnut. Been there for 36 years, I think. If you want to make an appointment, 215-627-2252. Send him an email, lee@llpavorsky.com. Tweeted him at @llpavorsky, a supporter of our charities, which are Mama T's Community Fridge and Providence Animal Center. LL Pavorsky Jewelers, there's no mic, so we don't get the catchy end thing. The passing thing is particularly interesting when you consider, especially in a lineup where Maxey is the point guard, who I think is a fine passer, but it's certainly, I wouldn't put as one of his like three primary skills. So in that starting lineup, as it were, you have Maxey, who's okay as a passer, Oubre, who's fine, Embiid, who's better than he was. Embiid might be the best passer in the starting lineup. Paul George, who's fine, right? And then Caleb Martin, who you think is less than fine as a passer, which is, I don't know that they need to be the Warriors or something, but the difference between having Batum and not having Batum was pretty obvious last year when he was on the floor.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty significant problem. I mean, just thinking about them trying to attack a scrambling defense, like just trying to attack the Celtics, right? Like they double team Embiid in the post and the ball's swinging around. It's like, do I feel good about Caleb Martin attacking a closeout and trying to make, a swing pass to the opposite corner? No, I don't. I don't feel good about that at all. If there is a way that this current iteration of the roster is going to go down, it's going to be like them getting flustered into a lot of bad possessions and turnovers late in games. And the other thing about Batum is like we always forget how valuable entry passing is. Like I lived through the 2019 26ers. It was unbearable watching that team try to throw an entry pass. And
especially, by the way,
about that,
especially when your primary offensive weapon is a center, right? Just to get that. Yeah,
exactly. So like they don't have a single guy on the roster right now who I feel good about that. At least when they had like even George Niang was pretty good at it, right? Like they would run a lot of plays where it's like, okay, a screen to set up Embiid for post up position, and Niang is the guy throwing the entry pass. There's nobody on this roster who I feel good about throwing that entry pass.
Well, now we can figure out what they can do moving forward. Now, I know he was nervous about his mic, so Yossi Gozlan joins us now. Can you talk? Let's see if we can hear you.
Hey guys, okay, so usually when I'm getting on StreamYard, I need to unplug my mic. So I already did that. How do I
You sound fine.
Okay, perfect. That's
a little bit louder and you'll be good. Can you talk a little louder and we'll be good?
Yeah, hold on.
Huh?
How's that? Is that better?
Oh, yes. See, you're all worried. Fucking A. You're good, man. You're good.
All right.
So, Yossi, thank you for joining us. And I appreciate you doing this because I was starting to feel stupid when we would talk about this stuff. So, Yossi's YouTube channel is Yossi Gozlan NBA, and then capsheet.com. And then we'll link all this stuff in the description. You seem to be good at the cap stuff. So I think this is helpful for us. Now, the thing that just happened before you signed on was the Sixers signed Caleb Martin. Looks like 4 years, $32 million or whatever, which takes up all of their available cap space, right? So from this point on, Sixers are just minimums, and we'll get into this in a minute, but they're minimums and whatever they do with KJ Martin if they end up signing him to a balloon deal. We're in the same space there, right?
Right.
Okay. So the new CBA goes into effect this year. Could you explain, I think everybody knows what the the salary cap is, what that number is. Could you explain what the first apron is, what the second apron is, and the different things that happen if you end up hitting the first or the second apron?
So the main thing about the aprons is even if you're just over one of them, you're going to have a lot of restrictions. And the second one is more so restrictions in the future. So once you're over the first apron, you can't take in more salaries than you're sending out. You cannot participate in the buyout market. You can't sign some of the more expensive players if they were making around the mid-level or more. And there's a couple other restrictions like they cannot use trade acceptance from the past, but those are the main ones. Then when you're over the second one, you
hold on,
basically have no
just to for dummies this. Okay, so you hit the first apron, which is what is 187 or something like that.
78.
178. Okay, so you hit that, and that is typically the only way that you're going over the cap is to sign your own players. So you hit that 178, and you said they can't participate in the buyout market. Is that they can participate? They can only just sign minimums, or they can't participate at all?
They can't sign anyone who is making the mid-level or more. So
Okay.
just under 13 mil. If you were making 12.8, you can't sign those guys.
Okay. And then, I'm sorry, you said the other restriction was, what was the other thing that was a big deal?
So then you don't get the big mid-level. You have the smaller form, that 5 million one.
Okay.
And you can't use trade exceptions from previous seasons. Those are the main ones.
Okay.
So it seems like the Sixers are trying to go over the first apron because the team's just gonna be really expensive having 3 max players. And so then there's the second apron, the 187, and they're already hard capped to it. They're not gonna be able to exceed it no matter what. So, and that's 187 or 188. You have no form of the mid-level. You cannot combine players to trade for a more expensive one. And you cannot send out cash in trades. And then you can sign and trade players, but just for picks and cash. You can't take players back, and you can't create trade exceptions from those. But then the bigger penalties are the draft picks, what it does to your draft pick 7 years out. If you finish over the second apron this year, your 2032 first-round pick is frozen. You're not allowed to trade it. And if you finish over it again the following season, that same pick falls to the end of the first round, 30th overall. And if multiple teams do it, then it's like whoever did best in 2032 gets the slightly higher pick, I guess.
So then and these are all, by the way, in addition to the financial penalties, which I know people think teams don't care about, but teams definitely care about, which is, paying luxury tax penalties, which happen with all these things. And this is for a different podcast, but, as these team valuations get too high, and which is, by the way, why I think you see some people getting out, like there's a very limited number of people who can afford a $4 or $5 billion team. The bottom line on these teams is going to become much more important. So the cash flow and positive cash flow every year, where when the Sixers, Josh Harris and David Blitzer bought the Sixers for $247 million. When your valuation is going up 10 or 12x over 10 years, you don't necessarily care if you're making a profit every year. But when all of a sudden, when we may be hitting close to the top of what these teams could even be worth, all that stuff is your costs are going to become more important. Can you explain how the KJ Martin balloon payment and trade works? So how much they can pay him, and then how much of that they can use in a trade?
So in regards to the Sixers and their whole thing, because they signed Paul George, he's getting a max contract. There's not going to be any sign and trade for him or any of their other free agents, since that would hard cap them to the first apron. They need a little more spending flexibility to be able to fill out the roster and have some trade flexibility later. So when I was doing my Sixers preview for them last month, I talked about the possibility maybe they use KJ Martin in a sign and trade to go after another guy. And I'm sure that's what they were doing this past week. After they got their agreements with Paul George and Kelly Oubre and Andre Drummond, they still had like a window to trade for a guy that's not making too much money, like a Dorian Finney-Smith. That would have been like a pretty perfect price point. That is $14 million. They could have used KJ Martin's salary and sign and traded another guy like a Buddy Hield, but now that he's, that's already off the table. And then they could have brought in Dorian Finney-Smith, and they still could have exceeded the first apron, and they would have had a much deeper roster. So now it looks like they got very fortunate. They got Caleb Martin at the rate that they got him at, with the remainder of their cap space, basically. And so that means the next thing they could do is keep KJ Martin for trade purposes. So to put it simply, he has that minimum cap hold, so they can still give Caleb Martin this, I guess it's going to start at like $7.5 million salary. And then they can still keep Caleb Martin's rights and re-sign him with up to really anything. So the sign and trade now possibility is very unlikely. They're probably not going to do it because it's just more complicated. They got to give him a really big salary to make it work. But what they can do now is just re-sign him to a salary that's like puts him up to the second apron, like at the very limit. It might be, I think at this point, it can be like around 15, 16 million for him. And then come January when he's trade eligible, now you have the salary to trade. So ideally, give him only the first year guaranteed. Maybe if you make it multiple years, obviously completely non-guarantee them because even just this first year salary is already a lot for him.
And can you just real quick, can you combine him with other, assuming they're a first apron team, you can combine him with other players, yes?
Yes, they can combine him. Like, let's say they want to combine him with Caleb Martin, for example. So that's his like 7.5 million and have KJ at like 16 mil. So then you can get, like a $23-24 million player. As long as you're not taking back more money than you're sending out, they can combine those guys, and that would put them in the realm to get a guy like a Cam Johnson or a Kyle Kuzma if they wanted to go that direction.
Okay, and then two more questions. Is there an advantage to operating? You said they want to be in the first apron. Is there an advantage to operating as a first apron team as opposed to below the first apron? Or are you saying first apron as opposed to a second apron team?
Yeah, first apron. Well, both really. I think they don't want to be below the first apron. They don't want to be hard capped to it just because how high top heavy their payroll is. That just keeping a high level of depth is going to be really difficult if they're hard capped to the first apron. If they're able to exceed it, that's an extra $11 million they could spend. So maybe that's the difference between having Andre Drummond and one of Kelly Oubre and Caleb Martin right now. It could have, otherwise the roster would more likely be their three max guys, Drummond, and then just minimums. So that's why they want to exceed the first apron, just because they happen to have these three max players. Just having that extra cushion and spending will make a huge difference this year.
I did not read the article. I saw it maybe last night before I went to bed. There was an article that said only one person with the Miami Heat understands the new CBA. I didn't know if it was an article about how smart this one guy was or an article about how dumb the Heat were. I couldn't figure out what it was about. What it does seem like there is a enormous energy from NBA teams to not be at the second apron, if not from a cost standpoint, from a difficulty in maneuvering standpoint. How good do you think teams are at like these sort of cap and apron gymnastics currently?
Well, I think for the Sixers now, they needed to really figure it out, and I think they're doing a pretty good job because they're the one cap space team. Them going from cap space to above the first apron, that's pretty impressive. So for them to figure that out, but I don't think I don't know how important it is that right now teams are still learning, and right now it seems like it's just more like restrictive. Teams are just limited in terms of what they can do. Maybe they do understand it and they're just kind of using it in negotiations. Hey, we can't really do too much because of this stuff. But I think I have a pretty good grasp on all these things, and I think I think it could be pretty manageable. It's more so about, I think, more than the financial penalties, just the future outlook stuff. Like if you have your first round pick 7 years out the value, yeah, that's kind of a problem.
Well, especially, by the way, if you want to trade that pick too, right? Because then whoever trades for that pick has to live with the possibility that you could. And I actually start wondering now that teams are trading picks, whether they can tie in stipulations to that pick not being like second apron penalized, right? Like, let's say I trade for your first round draft pick in 2023, 2032 or 2031 or whatever. And I'm expecting you won't be good at that point. But if you hit the second apron before that point, and then that pick ends up being pushed to last, then I get screwed trading for that draft pick. Like the gymnastics of trading for draft picks looks like they could get more complicated with the second apron.
So, so if the pick becomes tradable again, which means it's possible, it means you got out of the second apron for multiple years.
Okay,
I don't
right.
think there's any way to change what happened to that pick if it dropped to the end of the first round because
Right.
of multiple second apron years. I think so. So if he becomes tradable again, I think that team just has, whoever takes it just has to live with it. Hey, this is going to be 30th or 29th.
Okay, so moving forward for the Sixers, all they have now is minimums, right? That's all they can do. And a sign and trade with KJ Martin is not likely given the different sorts of things, the complications it would cause. But what you think is most likely is they sign him to a balloon deal and then they trade it later on after December 15th or January 15th or whatever the date is.
Yeah.
Did they, last question, and this, Marty wanted me to ask this question, Marty Teller, a very, for some reason, cap-obsessed Sixers fan and Ricky listener, they can, in that trade, they can use all of KJ Martin's salary, not just 50% of his salary or something. Like they can use all of these salaries.
Exactly. So the 50% thing, that only applies to sign and trades now.
Okay.
But once he's on a normal contract and he's trade eligible in January, then he just counts as whatever that amount is.
Okay, cool. I don't have any idea why you're so interested in this and why you do this, but it makes it better for everybody. Sixers Adam pointed out that you are a good follow, and you are, but the reason I wanted you to come on is even reading it, my eyes start glazing over and I have trouble concentrating on it. It is so much, and it's really like, we're just sports fans, man. Understanding this is hard, so I appreciate you doing all the work that you do.
No, of course, but lucky for you guys, you probably won't have to. It's going to be a long time before the Sixers are in this position again, so
yeah.
Whenever that time comes, I'll be ready again.
Thank you, man. Yossi Gozlan, anything else? Capsheet.com, YouTube, anything else to promote while we have you up?
And then just my Twitter. It's my name, at Yossi Gozlan. The off season's still pretty young, which is pretty surprising considering it's July 6th. So, make sure you're following me for a lot of just general reactions to the transactions. And my YouTube page, I haven't been posting anything in a while, just been trying to catch up with all the news and updates as they happen, but I'll be doing something on the Sixers soon now that their off season is almost complete.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you. Thanks for joining us.
Of course, you're welcome.
All right, thanks, Yossi. Before we talk about the other stuff that I wanted to talk about you with, I want to talk just about like some expectations for Paul George, for Drummond, and for, we talked about Oubre, so we can knock him off the list, but for Maxey again. Final sponsor of the pod is Briggs Auction. I love Briggs Auction. We don't have CJ here. Now, CJ always does the Briggs Auction item of the week because CJ loves buying weird shit on the internet as much as I do. Briggs Auction is, I would say, a four-generation family-owned and operated auction house in Delco. I would say it is very helpful in two things. One, there's actually things that if you need, I met somebody there once who was just furnishing their basement. If you need furniture, if you need, that sort of stuff, if you need actual home goods, it's great. You don't have to wait for the furniture company to make it and ship it to you. You're going to get one-of-a-kind items. You're going to find stuff there that you're not going to find anywhere else. Just for a utility purpose, Briggs Auction is great. But then if you're like me and you just love hunting on the internet for things that you don't need and you didn't even know you wanted until you saw them, Briggs Auction is perfect for that. Get the app in the App Store or Google Play, or just go to briggsauction.com. They have a brand new discovery auction up. There's usually discovery auctions and estate auctions. I like the discovery auctions a little bit better because there's more weird shit. I always go to the collectible section. I go to the art section. Then the vehicles. I think there's 8 like dirt bikes and cars in this new one as well. And I would say that the best thing to do with Briggs Auction is check in once a week and then put in a bid or two. Like stuff starts as low as $1. Some of it gets very, very expensive, but starts as low as $1. I would recommend those sections. The collectible section, I think there's 3 Jim Thome bats as one lot in the new one. Jim Thome, very important Philly, incredibly important Philly. And if you win an item at Briggs, you can either go to open pickup on Saturday, make an appointment for during the week, or they can work with you on a shipper. If you have a bunch of stuff you need to get rid of, you're downsizing, you have maybe somebody passed away and left a bunch of stuff for you and you want to get rid of it, respectfully, of course, send an email to info@briggsauction.com. That is info@briggsauction.com. Briggs Auction, the official auction of the Ricky. Okay, well, now that their cap space is used up and we're just talking about minimum guys, I wanted to talk to you about like the guys that they have, and Paul George specifically, and how good he has to be. I think there's I'm thinking about this in two ways. You wrote a really good article on RightsRickySanchez.com, the Is Paul George a Loser thing, which is very good, by the way. Your writing, I don't know how it's gotten better over the years and that you get very little feedback from me. I just like all of it, but you've evolved, as we all do, in doing what we do, but you've become like even better a writer than when you first joined a Ricky, at least for my taste. So I really like that article, but it was really sort of diving into the negative perceptions of him, but how good he actually is. One thing that you sort of settled on that like I think is an interesting thing to think about is like, how much better is he than Tobias Harris? Like if we had Paul George in this series or that series or this series, just doing the minimum of what we would ask somebody to do, what better position they would be in. And that is absolutely fair. My fear is, and this is, I think, what some of the negative feedback about Paul George comes with, is I think it's sort of coded fear about Embiid, in that when we see them signing Paul George, most of the criticisms about him, I'm sorry for that, the lawnmower out there, there's nothing I can do about it, but most of the criticisms about him are sort of criticisms that you'd levy against a player who was your best player, not your third best player, you know? So I wonder if, first of all, I think that's what a lot of the criticism is about, is that people deep down know or think they need somebody more dependable and better than Embiid, which is not something they could actually do, but I think that is actually the fear. So all that is to say, what do you think they actually realistically can get, and what do you think they actually realistically need out of Paul George?
They need him to do all the stuff that he's excellent at, which is why it's such a great fit. Like, they just need him to hit catch and shoot threes and attack closeouts, carry the offense for like 3 minutes a game, and not get picked on defense. And he can do that. I mean, that's like everything that drove Clippers fans nuts about him are things that like are prohibitive for being the number one or number two guy. And I don't think that those things will be as nearly as big of a problem here. And you are, like you brought up Embiid. I think you're making a great point that if you believe that Joel can be the best player on a championship team, you have to believe that he can overcome the fact that his third best player is sort of inconsistent and makes excuses on podcasts. Like, right. You just have to, it's okay if you don't want to believe in Joel. Like, that's a valid position. But if you do, you can't just be like, oh man, Paul George putting up 15 in one game in the Eastern Conference Finals is the reason we like. No, it's just that can't be the logic, and you can't like. Paul George cannot be the fall guy here. If things go poorly, it's going to be on Joel.
That's a good way to put it. I was talking in the hallways at WIP with my co-host and with Tom Kelly. We were talking about this, and I said, "Did you notice? Mikal Bridges in his time." With the Nets specifically, we've been able to see what his limitations are. He's a good player, obviously, but it's also become very clear what he is not good at, and that is being a primary offensive option. He can do it once in a while, but like Paul George is way better than him at that for the time we're going to need it. But did you notice no Knick fan, started picking apart that Mikal Bridges what he couldn't do and what he couldn't do this, can't do that. And that's because, rightly or wrongly, they are ultimately confident in Jalen Brunson. Like, that's essentially what it comes down to, is nobody thinks they need Mikal Bridges to do any of those things, or OG Anunoby. So now they might be wrong in that Jalen Brunson is a short guard, and there's not like a lot of short guards in the history of the league that were primary scoring options on championship teams. They might just be wrong, but I think it speaks to their confidence. And I agree with you. If we can't win as Paul George as our third option, then that speaks more to the first two options than it does about the third option. Do you know what I'm saying?
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
100%. And then like that honestly is the best thing you can say about this offseason is that they've given Joel a chance. Like last year, no matter how great Joel was, I don't think they could have made the finals or beaten the Celtics or whatever. Like this year, they have a chance. Joel has a chance. You can judge Joel completely on his own merit. There's not a Tobias Harris in the way. Like Joel has a chance this year.
Yeah, and it's on him. It's on him. I mean, there will be. We were, again, a WIP reference, but we were talking about the Eagles and whether people actually believe they're going to be good or whether they hope they're going to be good. Like, which is the one? And somebody I'm seeing as this Embiid defender, and they were like, well, do you believe in Joel or do you hope? And I was like, I hope. Like, quite honestly, I just hope. I think more than anything, I believe when he is healthy, he is one of the 3 or 4 best players in the NBA. But, like, I hope he is healthy at the end of the year. I just hope. There's nothing I can do other than hope. And I hope that whatever we saw in the Knicks series last year, which I thought was a step forward for him in a lot of ways from a playoff standpoint, in that there was only one game that he looked like he was out of, and he actually ended up with a triple-double and was pretty necessary in overtime from a defensive standpoint for them to win the game. So even in his worst game, he was still important. I hope that there's like more where that came from. But I do think there's going to be times that Paul George is going to have to be closery sometimes. Don't you, from an offensive standpoint, or no?
Yeah, I would maybe differentiate has to and will.
Right.
Like there will be games where he just has it going and Joel's a little off and they just run it through PG. But yeah, I don't think that's unfair. I mean, we've seen it over the years, not only with Joel, but with big men in general. It's hard to get them the ball at the end of games. Like you kind of need the Maxeys of the world and Paul George of the world to step up. And I mean, that is one area where I would say it's fair. If Paul George just like completely disappears in the last 3 minutes of every game,
right? Okay,
then that's fair to criticize him. But yeah, I don't think it's ridiculous to say that. No.
So Drummond, I think people are too high on Drummond in general, and I'm probably too negative on Drummond in general. I have no idea why people love him so much, and we're so excited to have him. Like, it seems outsized from what he's good at. In my head, he can't stay on the floor during the playoffs. Like, he'll be a disaster. Am I overthinking this or not?
I think you're overthinking it. I think that a lot of people have not adjusted to a post-Warriors world where everyone is imagining like you're going to have to defend like split screens with Steph and Clay. Like that's just not like, you're not going to see that. Like I think he can defend and drop coverage against Jalen Brunson as well as the next backup. You know, like I don't see him being like a huge liability against the Knicks or the Celtics or the Bucks or whoever. Like it's just not 2017 anymore, and we don't need to have 5 switchable players on the court at all times.
You're right. Yeah, it's actually funny. I think the way that people are talking about the Celtics now is how people talked about the Warriors, in that people are like, well, this is the model for how to be good now. I was like, oh, yeah, simple. Just a hit on 2 draft picks, like, You can't even believe that they hit on him, and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and then somehow wind up with a treasure trove of draft picks from a star trade that ends up netting these super high level players. Like I don't think the Warriors were ever replicatable in that way, and I don't think the Celtics are either. In that the Knicks sort of are like the shitty Celtics now, in that they have players who are sort of similar to the players that the Celtics have, just not as good, Eric Gordon, I honestly didn't watch the Suns at all last year. I've been a fan of his for a long time. He's one of my favorite players. If he's anything like he was 2 or 3 years ago, I think he'll be pretty excellent and probably play more than most people are thinking. I think he'll probably play 25 or 30 minutes a game, honestly, because of the shooting and Oubre, not much of a shooter. Caleb Martin, not much of a shooter. I think Gordon will be on the court. Did you watch him at all last year or no?
Yeah, some. I didn't watch a ton of the Suns, but like he's still Eric Gordon. He's just a little slower and looks a little more like a fire hydrant than he did. But
guard PJ
dude,
Tucker. He definitely looks
yeah,
like
he shoots from 30 feet, and that's all that matters. Like, and he's not even like really slow. Like he can still attack a closeout and get to the rim. Like he's got some off the dribble stuff that's still useful. I love it, man. I mean, just thinking about opposing defenses trying to defend an Embiid post up with Maxey, Eric Gordon, and Paul George on the floor. Like, I don't know where the help's coming from. I mean, that's really, really hard to guard.
And then finally, just Maxey in general. He's gotten so good, but he is still such, like, his ceiling is so confounding to me in high level basketball because of his size and sort of how he plays. He's the same size as Brunson. He might be a little bit shorter. For some reason, I'm more confident in what Brunson can do from an extended playoff thing than I am with Maxey, because Brunson does this thing where he's able to create mid-range space and sort of use his body and get fouled, whereas Maxey's got to like fly past people or shoot from far away. And I worry about teams like Boston and New York, and like, if there's one thing I want to see from him this offseason, it's one of two things. It's either finding a way, getting better at getting fouled so he can create sort of baskets out of nowhere for himself, or becoming a better playmaker, one of those two. Because I think for him to realize what we believe that he is and what he could be, he needs one of those two things. I'm just curious where you are on Maxey.
Yeah, I'll probably write about this at some point, but the big thing for him, man, is the passing has to make a leap. It just has to. Like, game 6 against the Knicks, all they did was pack the paint and help off of, the weak side and strong side shooters. Maxey was completely frazzled. Like, people forget he was really bad in that game. But that's just the thing that has to make the leap. I think, to me, it's all about the passing. I don't think I worry about the athleticism or the mid-range stuff. It's just, can he read playoff defenses at a level where he can be your number 2?
I'm interested. He has gotten better every year in a way that I didn't think he could get better every year. I am curious when that stops, and if not, what part of it he ends up doing this year. He's actually, even the defense has become, he'll always be limited because of his size, but even the way he competes on defense and his ability on defense has gotten far beyond where I thought he would be able to be. There's a limitation to it because of his size, but I do think he's gotten much better there. I am super curious to see what he adds this offseason, because I think it will be something. Embiid, I saw the video yesterday of him with the Team USA guys. It was actually kind of cool. I was against him playing Team USA in the beginning because I was worried about health. Now I just keep thinking to myself, well, he's never played for Team USA before, and he always gets hurt anyway. So maybe this will be good, if aside from the attracting other players standpoint, because I think we're sort of done with that for a little while. But maybe this will keep him. The thing that keeps Joel in shape is playing basketball. So maybe the A, playing basketball this summer, and B, being around guys who take it as fucking seriously as the guys on this team do, maybe those things will rub off on him. I'm actually pretty positive about him playing in the Olympics.
I agree with that. I want him being around LeBron and Steph and just kind of like observing them and feeling their energy and knowing what it's like to play with them. And the other thing that I think is like great about the Olympics is like, dude, it's really intense and like high stakes. Like, it feels like a playoff game. And just having some more of that experience, I think, will be really good for him, especially surrounded by all of these great players and getting to see what it's like to be like around a LeBron,
Yeah, I think it'll be good. Even just, it was a reminder seeing him with Durant and LeBron and all those guys in those videos. I was like, fuck, man. Our guys with the big boys this summer, and I'm excited to watch him, and it might make me feel good to see him. The last time we saw him, he looked so physically limited. Seeing him in these games where they're not physical in the way that NBA playoff games are. So seeing him getting to move in space and actually seeing him, I don't know, like moving well will be good for my soul as compared to the last time we saw him move.
I agree. I really hope that he's in amazing shape. I mean, I harped on it a lot at the end of last year, but man, this just has to be the year. We've been saying it for like 6 years. You got to be in better shape. You have to be in better shape. Like, it's not okay to be, I don't know, 10 pounds overweight, 15 pounds overweight. Like, I just need to see him in career best shape.
Yeah, we were talking about him the other day on the air, and I understand people's frustrations with him, but I also think about the fact that he's never in any real way pushed himself like out of here. When those whispers happen a lot from other top level players, and he's trolled with it before. And I feel like people have tried to create the Joel wants to leave thing, but it's never actually been real. And forgetting about the other players on the team, when the Colangelo thing happened, he could have just said, fuck this place, and left and insisted, and they would have had very little argument against it. And I think now some of his patience might be because he doesn't care about winning that much. I think it's like on the list. I've talked about what a hassle moving is, and he's comfortable here. He knows everybody here. They treat him right here. The devil you know is better than the devil that you don't know. But I do think a lot of the frustration with him, I wish some people would think about how nice it is that we've had a player who they drafted evolve to be great here and stay here. And the people who talk about trading him, think about what it was like. I just want people to think about what it was like after we traded Charles and what it was like after we traded Iverson. And just think about those eras after. They're waiting for a player. By the way, both imperfect players. Charles, imperfect player. Iverson, imperfect player. But two of the greatest players that we've ever had, and what it was like afterwards. And every time you get sick of Joel, think about what it's going to be like after Joel, because it's probably going to fucking blow after Joel. So, final thing before we go, we got an email from Paul. Just to stay on a good, this is a positive thing. So Paul is older. I forget how old he told me he was in the email, but he says old guy here. He says, 2024 is a lot like 1982. Sixers traded for Moses and won a championship. Morey is Pat Williams. Embiid is Moses. Doc is Paul George. Superstar small forwards one notch below their prime. Most of their careers, they were the main guy. Now they contribute as needed and still show some of their greatness. Maxey is Andrew Toney. Unstoppable guards who scored all three levels. Michael Cooper and Moncrief identify Toney as the most difficult player to guard, more difficult than MJ. Bobby Jones is Oubre. That might be a stretch. Rangy defensive studs contribute with rebounds and offense when needed. Run the break, get back in transition. Clem Johnson is Andre Drummond. Excellent backup center. Clint Richardson is Eric Gordon. Combo guards off the bench. And he says, I think we need a Mark Ivoroni, a power forward who plays 12 to 15 minutes and serves as neutral playing with four scorers, adds rebound and decent defense, and eats minutes. Nick Nurse is Billy Cunningham. Coaches that are excellent for the model type of coach for their era. Cunningham was an excellent players coach and decent with X and O's. Nick Nurse is great with X and O's and decent as a players coach. Your thoughts? Does history repeat itself? I think there's some stretches in there, but I'm willing to buy into it.
I'm with it. I just have no feel for what it was like. Half the players on that team, I have no feel for at all. But hey, man, I really respect the historical knowledge. So if somebody who was around back then is saying it,
yes,
I think there's some validity to it.
Yeah, I was 6 when that team was there. And then his non-basketball question, how much money would it take for you guys to sell your podcast to a national podcasting network? Love the show. Spike's ad reads make me want to buy a beach house in Delaware, borrow money, buy jewelry, and get injured in a car accident. The problem with selling our podcast to a national podcast thing is that the podcast isn't worth anything without me and Mike. So it's not like we can just take a big payday and fly off into the sunset. We still have to do the podcast every single day, even if we sold it to somebody else. So if that were the case, might as well just keep it. I like it better this way. I like having our own staff that nobody tells us what to do. I like our t-shirts. I like all of our little crew. And by the way, as a side note to like every other anyone covering the Philadelphia 76ers, I truly believe we're better at it than any of the big companies are anyway. We have more, our writing is better, which speaks to you and AU and the Danny, and our podcast is better. And so what would we go to a bigger platform for? It would have to be a lot of money.
It really is the best thing about the Ricky that it's gotten as big as it is, but it still feels like a mom and pop. And it's gotten so much better while also still being what it's always been. And that's just the best thing about it.
Yeah, it makes me, I don't know if I tell you guys enough, but I am so proud that we have what we have. Not just the podcast, like the entire crew. I will never forget when Daryl was on the podcast and we started telling him about our writers, and he was like, wait a minute, you have like writers and like you have a whole staff? And I said, yeah, it's cool. And we're like, it does feel like there were like rebellious or something. I love it. I love that it's never changed and we've gotten better. If you want to subscribe to Mike's writing, and by the way, this is one of the best changes I think we made, changing the website to a Substack site, because so many more people are reading it now. I think we've increased our newsletter like subscription base by like 25% in the 3 or 4 months that we've been on Substack, which is pretty significant. So if you want Mike's writing, just go to writestorickysanchez.com and tap the subscribe button, and you will get Mike's writing, or you can pick what you want from the writers, but you will get everything. Mike's writing, AU's writing, the Danny's writing, Zoe and me in the Corner 3 newsletter, and the pods, and they all just get emailed to you. And that way you don't have to worry about social. We were so dependent on Twitter and SEO to get people to read it, and now we can just have like a one-to-one relationship with people, which I think is cool. MOC, we almost have a team. We will have a team as soon as they sign Marcus Morris, which I'm sure is happening. I think we still need a point guard, still need a power forward, but aside from that, it seems like we have a team.
This rules, man. They're in a great spot. Like, honestly, you got to give it up to Daryl. You wrote a really good thing, and Zoe also wrote something really good in the newsletter. Like, you got to enjoy this one. We've had so many bad things happen. It might still end badly, but like, this is a good time. And it's so freaking cool that Paul George came here and that the team is in as good a shape as they are. Like, these are good times, and it's just awesome.
Yeah. I would have traded Tyrese Maxey 4 different times at this point. Like whether it was for Damian Lillard or one of the number of the trades that we thought about, or I would have gotten so frustrated that I would have dumped a pick to trade Tobias Harris or whatever. And we would not be in the position that we're in now. And again, this most likely will sound stupid in 7 months when they lose in the first or second round again, but we definitely have a better chance now than we've ever had. And I think the largest amount of credit goes to Morey and Embiid. Like Embiid for not making noises and forcing Morey to make bad decisions, just to, like, you remember when New Orleans started getting worried about Anthony Davis, all the sort of win now silly things they did that mortgaged the entire future for a moment. And I do think Embiid could have made this worse on Morey and forced those sorts of things, and he never did it, and Morey never did it either, and they both deserve a lot of credit. Now they got to win. All right, we will be back this week, and thank you to Yossi, and thank you to MOC, and we'll talk to you next time. Are you down with TTP?
Yeah, lick face.